10 dots on a Russian scope should have been routine. 10 noisy props. 10 cheap airframes. 10 easy kills. Instead, a fighter pilot blinked at a radar that kept forgetting the targets existed, missiles chased reflections in the dirt, and a factory that wasn't there suddenly was lit by a bloom that said otherwise. This wasn't magic. It was the new math of air defense, where speed doesn't beat stealth and stealth doesn't beat power. Discipline beats them both. And tonight, discipline arrived on slow wings. The first mistake was doctrinal. Russia built a system to swat jets, with diagrams, crew drills, and tactics that point sensors up. Drones don't argue with doctrine, they route around it. They don't file flight plans or burn contrails. They draw lines across maps that commanders label impossible, and then they prove why impossible is an expensive word. Down in the ground salt, a radar beam paints two worlds at once, the airframe and its reflection in the dirt. At hedge-top altitude, the return is a smear, not a dot, and if a missile's brain chooses which smear is real by strength alone, half your million-dollar shots die chasing ghosts while the rest arrive too late to matter. At the boundary gate, the ambush was supposed to be simple. A fast mover in look-down mode, quick shots at 15 to 20 kilometers, a tidy debrief to follow. The drones had read the play. Power came back, prop discs turned edge-on to the beam, and a radar seeing area, not intent, caught less surface to grab. Then power went to idle entirely. 30 heartbeats of glide turned a flicker into nothing. Guns and missiles need a track. Nothing isn't a track. One drone didn't make it, and that was part of the point. It climbed, transmitted, and burned like a flare that said shoot here. A deliberate sacrifice so the others could whisper past as 9 lines threading between radio masts and tree lines. That was the moment the intercept shifted from a checklist to a math problem the pilot couldn't finish with the fuel he had. Electronic warfare rarely feels like a thunderclap. It arrives like fog. Jamming doesn't have to fool a pilot or a processor forever, only long enough to make them choose wrong. Along a farm-flat corridor, the Russians stacked their pieces, emitters to shout, sensors that never speak, and command posts tuned for the instant a transmitter blinks. GPS arrives from space as a whisper, far below the noise floor. A truck on the ground can shout 1,000,000 times louder. To a receiver, shouting looks like truth, and truth steers autopilots straight into places where missiles live. The counter isn't clever code so much as discipline and timing. You ride an inertial spine and trust it as long as you dare. When drift becomes mission-killing, one aircraft accepts the risk, breaks silence for 2 seconds to re-zero the pack, then runs like a lighthouse that draws the arrows while the others vanish back into quiet. You don't do it often. You do it exactly once per gate if you can help it. The cost is measured in interceptors spent on a decoy instead of the rest. Radars can be blinded and antennas deceived, but acoustics is a primitive that ages well. An engine is a drum you cannot mute without stopping it, and in a forest a passive array listens not for words but for rhythm, the harmonic ladder of a propeller at working RPM. 8 microphones on poles feed a processor trained on captured airframes. Delay time differentials become geometry. Geometry becomes coordinates, and coordinates handed to a battery commander enable a launch without ever lighting a radar. Fire passive, and you remain rumor until the missile wakes its seeker at the last breath. The counter to a listening net is to break the song. You cannot erase your engine, but you can scramble its rhythm. Throttle oscillations and altitude throws add Doppler jitter, dirtying the acoustic firing solution. The missiles that do launch come late, or they wake early, or their fuses argue with the ground echo at razor-low altitude and choose wrong. Not every bird lives. Enough do, and enough is all an attacker needs. At the final gate, the defense traded steel for lies. The last line wasn't guns. It was a dome of perfect counterfeits. Spoofing is not noise. It is counterfeit signal that arrives stronger, cleaner, and prettier than reality. Instruments present elegant graphs and impossible maps, and faithful autopilots obey the sensor they've been told is most trustworthy. On most drones, that sensor is satellite navigation. When the sky commands a turn away from the target your camera can see with its glass, the aircraft begins to argue with itself, and that argument can destroy it faster than any missile. Survival there depends on a hierarchy of truth inside the code. Good mission software carries a pecking order. Visual lock beats inertial drift. Inertial beats GPS when GPS collides with physics. Magnetics and baro get a vote when terrain says they should. The trick isn't exotic, it's modesty. Don't let any single sensor be a god. When the spoof began to slide the world sideways, the lead airframe demoted the sky and promoted the picture. Wings level. Hold the line. Fly by camera and keep the inertial spine honest. One hit mattered more than any dogfight kill, not because of overpressure, but because of systems. Beneath the roofline were racks and consoles that knit batteries into a network. Networks make defenders fast. Break the knot, and everyone fights as a lonely outpost again. That's the quiet physics of deterrence in a learning war. Turn fast kill chains into long debates, and cheap attackers who never wait for minutes will sprint through the openings those debates create. Step back from the drama of one raid, and you see the slope of the curve that made it possible. By early 2025, credible open analyses point to monthly production of FPV and long-range one-way drones in the low hundreds of thousands across both sides, roughly an order of magnitude above early 2024. That pace matters because every iteration spawns a counter in weeks instead of years. Acoustic arrays learn new prop signatures. Spoofers rotate new lure maps. Autopilots gain new truth hierarchies. The race isn't about arms as much as learning, and the side that patches faster wins. Where counts diverge publicly, treat numbers as ranges and trends rather than marble tablets. The strategic point is acceleration, not a single tally. The broader implications run in 4 straight lines. First comes strategic reach without strategic aircraft. If low-signature props can chain through layered defense by timing, terrain, and tactics, you don't need to suppress the entire network. You need to confuse it in slices, just long enough to cross the beams. Second is cost asymmetry. Each defending shot is an economic decision. If you force a battery to throw radar-guided interceptors at airframes cheaper than the launch propellant, your attack is profitable even when it fails tactically. The damage line item is only half the ledger. The other half is replacement strain, operator fatigue, and radar hours that cannot be flown again tomorrow because they were burned tonight. Third is command and control fragility. Remove the fusers and coordinators, and elite surface-to-air systems devolve into good guns with poor timing. When fast kill chains turn into slow approval chains, opportunities appear where they didn't exist. Finally comes doctrine drift. The more often a layered IADS must rewrite its checklists to handle slow movers, the less confident it becomes against what it was built for: fighters, cruise missiles, and high-end threats. Each fix steals attention and training hours from the original mission, and defense risks becoming jack of all threats, master of none. The defenders are not stuck in amber. They will push multimodal fusion forward, radar braided with acoustics, and IR and oddball cues like pressure wakes and prop tip vortices. Expect shorter range, higher volume interceptors tuned for low flyers and passive fences that treat engines like fingerprints. Spoofers will turn meaner, toggling credible microtruths more often to drive autopilots into limit cycles. The attackers will answer with truth hierarchies that can be reweighted in flight, with swarm-level decision rules that don't need a mothership, and with decoy economics, designing 1 or 2 members of every package to look irresistible to the most expensive interceptors. The most important upgrade will not be explosive, it will be firmware. Operational caution belongs here. Live routes, frequencies, and timings are rightly withheld. This is pattern-level analysis, not a playbook. Machines do the flying, but people do the risk math. In a dark van, someone decided to burn an aircraft so the others could correct drift. Another rider throttled his engine like a drummer to poison a firing solution he could not see. A defender, knowing his radar would paint him like a bonfire, chose to shoot blind on coordinates and nearly won. What separates sides in a learning war isn't only inventory. It's who lets the edge learn fastest without freezing the middle. That human tolerance for iteration, accepting a loss today to pay for fewer losses tomorrow, is the quiet superpower behind the flashy footage and smoking roofs. After the fire, a successful strike doesn't buy permanent paralysis. It buys time, days or weeks of slower reactions, rerouted convoys, delayed sorties, and maintenance sprints to swap scorched cabinets and melted cables. It buys attention, meetings where commanders divert scarce experts to patch the hole you just proved exists. In war, attention is a resource, and forcing an adversary to spend it badly is victory measured in planning hours rather than square kilometers. The bill comes due for the attacker, too, in a handful of lost airframes and the work to build the next batch smarter. But the factories don't sleep, and neither do the algorithms. Strip away the headlines, and the bottom line is simple. 10 drones did not smash the densest air defense network on Earth. They did something subtler and more dangerous. They taught it. They taught defenders to doubt a perfect track, to listen for engines when radar feels certain, to suspect that the quietest bird is the one you shouldn't be shooting. Teaching is slow until it isn't, and when lessons compile on cheap wings and honest code, maps do change. If you want clear, sourced breakdowns of how learning beats inventory in modern war, without the hype and without the classified fan fiction, hit subscribe. Drop a comment with the next system or tactic you want unpacked. Acoustic fences, micro-IR pickets, or swarm logic at the edge. And if this helped, share it. The more people understand the math behind the headlines, the harder it is for wishful thinking to masquerade as strategy.